The sheriff's cruiser lights flashed blue and red across the rippling lake water, cutting through the twilight like a knife. I stood on the dock, my boots sinking into the soft, mossy wood, the chill of the evening air biting at my exposed arms, as the HOA president's face twisted in fury under the glare of the spotlights. "You can't do this!" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the surrounding pines, carrying the sharp tang of pine sap and impending rain. In my hand, the deed to the entire lake trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline surging through me like a river breaking its banks. I'd just banned the whole neighborhood from accessing what they thought was their precious community asset. And as the deputies hauled her away for trespassing on my newly acquired property, I whispered, "Justice served, you HOA tyrant." But how did a simple fishing trip turn into this full-blown takedown? It all started months ago, when I first cast my line into those forbidden waters. Let me take you back to that sweltering June morning in Willow Creek Estates, a gated suburb nestled in the humid heart of Central Florida, where the air always hung heavy with the scent of orange blossoms and marshy wetlands. I just retired from my job as a civil engineer specializing in water rights and environmental regulations. Years spent battling corporations over dams and aquifers, honing my skills in the murky depths of property law. It was supposed to be my quiet haven, a modest ranch-style house backing onto Lake Serenity, a man-made body of water ringed by cypress trees dripping with Spanish moss. The neighborhood buzzed with the constant hum of lawn mowers and the distant splash of kids in pools. But I craved the simple pleasure of fishing at dawn, the cool mist rising off the lake like a ghost, the earthy smell of wet soil mixing with the faint metallic taste of coffee from my thermos. I unpacked my tackle box. That first day, the sun beating down on my neck, sweat trickling like tiny rivers down my back. The rod felt familiar in my calloused hands, a relic from my army days where I'd learned patience in the field, waiting for the right moment to strike. As I baited the hook with a wriggling worm, its slimy texture cool against my fingers, I heard the crunch of gravel under tires, a silver Lexus SUV pulling up to the curb. Out stepped Evelyn Hargrove, the HOA president, mid-50s, with her bleach-blonde bob haircut so stiff it looked like it could deflect bullets, clad in a pastel polo shirt and khakis that screamed country club enforcer. Her perfume wafted over, a cloying floral assault that clashed with the natural fishy odor of the lake. "Excuse me, sir," she called out in that faux southern drawl, thick as molasses but sharp as a gator's tooth. "You can't fish here without approval. It's in the covenants." I reeled in slowly, the line whispering through the guides, water dripping with a rhythmic plop. "Morning, ma'am. Name's Jack Harlan. Just moved in. The realtor said the lake's open." "To residents." Her eyes narrowed, lips pursing like she'd sucked on a lemon, the tartness almost palpable in the air. She handed me a pink slip. My first fine, $200 for unauthorized recreational activity. The paper crinkled in my grip, still warm from her printer. That's when the spark ignited, that familiar defiance from my engineering battles rising like steam off hot asphalt after a rain. But I smiled, nodded, and watched her drive away, the exhaust fumes lingering like a bad omen. "Where are you watching from? Comment your city. I want to see how far HOA power reaches. If you've ever been bullied by an HOA, you're going to love this ending. Stick with me." Over the next few weeks, the pettiness ramped up. I'd wake to the screech of Evelyn's golf cart, patrolling at 6 a.m., her binoculars glinting in the early light as she spied from behind manicured hedges. The neighborhood smelled of fresh-cut grass and chlorine from overtreated pools, but under it lurked the rot of control freaks. One evening, as the crickets chirped their symphony and fireflies danced like floating embers, I found my mailbox stuffed with violation notices, grass too long by half an inch, trash bin visible for 5 minutes past curfew. The fines piled, up like storm debris after a hurricane, each one a jab at my freedom. I paid them at first, gritting my teeth, the metallic bite of anger on my tongue. But then I started digging, literally and figuratively. My garage became my war room, cluttered with old blueprints and legal tomes, the musty scent of aged paper, mingling with the oily tang of my fishing gear. As a former engineer, I dealt with water disputes in the Everglades, where one misplaced easement could flood entire communities. I pored over the HOA documents under the harsh glow of a desk lamp, its heat warming my forehead as sweat beaded like dew. That's when I dropped my first knowledge bomb on myself. HOAs in Florida can't impose fines without a 14-day notice and a hearing opportunity per state statute 720.305. It's illegal to slap them on without due process. But Evelyn's board skipped that step every time, exposing their scandalous shortcuts. I confronted her at the next meeting. The community center reeking of stale coffee and cheap air freshener, the fluorescent lights buzzing like angry hornets. "Evelyn," I said, standing tall amid the folding chairs scraping on linoleum, "your fines are null. No hearing means no enforcement." The room fell silent, save for the tick of the wall clock and the distant rumble of thunder. Her face flushed red as a boiled lobster, the heat in the room thickening the air. She stammered, We have discretion." But I saw the crack, the way her manicured nails tapped nervously on the podium, chipping the polish. The meeting ended, in chaos, whispers rippling like waves on the lake, and I walked out into the muggy night, lightning flashing on the horizon, promising a storm. This isn't just my fight, it's yours too. Tell me if your HOA has ever crossed the line. The escalation hit like a Category 3. One afternoon, as I grilled burgers on my patio, the sizzle of meat fat dripping onto coals, the smoky aroma blending with the sweet jasmine from my fence, I spotted Evelyn's cronies measuring my dock with a tape measure that snapped like a whip. They claimed it encroached on common area, but my property line hugged the water's edge. The sun baked my skin, sticky humidity clinging like a second layer, while mosquitoes buzzed insistently around my ears. I waved them off, but inside, fury boiled. That night, under a moonlit sky where the lake reflected stars like scattered diamonds, I snuck out with my surveyor's tools from my engineering kit, the cool metal reassuring in my palms. Marking stakes in the soft earth, the dirt crumbling under my fingers with an earthy scent, I confirmed what I suspected. The HOA had redrawn maps years ago, illegally shifting boundaries to claim more lakefront. It was a scandal waiting to be exposed. But as I hammered the last stake, a flashlight beam pierced the darkness, Evelyn's voice slicing through. "Trespassing on association property." Her heels clicked on the path, echoing sharply, her breath coming in huffs laced with mint gum. We stood face to face, the night air thick with tension, crickets falling silent as if holding their breath. "What would you have done in my place? Drop it in the comments." I held my ground, the flashlight's glare stinging my eyes, the damp grass soaking through my shoes. "This is my land, Evelyn. Your maps are forged." She laughed, a brittle sound like breaking glass, but her eyes darted to the shadows, betraying unease. The next day, a certified letter arrived, the envelope crisp and official, smelling faintly of ink and bureaucracy. It demanded I cease all lake activities or face liens. My heart pounded like a bass drum, the paper shaking in my hands as I read it twice. But buried in the fine print was their hypocrisy. Evelyn's own backyard extended into the water with a private boat slip, unpermitted. I photographed it from afar, the shutter click soft but satisfying, the lens capturing her double standards in high definition. Gathering allies came next. Old Mr. Ramirez next door, a Cuban immigrant with a thick accent and hands rough from years. As a mechanic, shared stories over bitter espresso that burned my throat, the steam carrying notes of cigar smoke from his porch. "They fined me for my flag," he grumbled, the fabric snapping in the breeze outside. Mrs. Patel across the street, her sari rustling like silk whispers, confided about denied garden approvals while the scent of curry spices wafted from her kitchen, warm and inviting. We formed a whisper network, meetings in backyards where laughter mixed with outrage, the grill's heat flushing our faces as beers fizzed open with a satisfying pop. Ever dealt with an HOA bully? Let's see how many of us there are. Midway through this brewing war, I hit the library archives, the cool, conditioned air a relief from the outdoor swelter, dust motes dancing in sunbeams filtering through blinds. Flipping through yellowed plats, the pages crackling like dry leaves, I uncovered the second knowledge bomb. Under Florida's water rights laws, lakes like Serenity are navigable waters if connected to public systems, meaning HOAs can't restrict access without state approval. It's an illegal monopoly. This tied directly to Evelyn's control freakery. Her board had lobbied to dam a feeder stream, choking off natural flow for aesthetic reasons. My pulse quickened, the revelation tasting like victory, sharp and sweet. But Evelyn struck back hard. One stormy evening, rain pelting the roof like gunfire, thunder rumbling deep in my chest. I found my dock vandalized, boards splintered, the wood slick and splintery under my fingers, reeking of fresh sawdust and malice. Footprints led to her. Property line, muddied and accusing. I called the sheriff, but he shrugged, the radio crackling on his belt, coffee breath warm on my face. HOA matters, son, civil. Fury ignited, hot as the lightning splitting the sky, illuminating her house where lights glowed smugly. If you think HOAs should be held accountable, type yes so we can get this trending. The community harm broadened. Ramirez's car got towed. For parking violations that never existed, the tow truck's chains clanking like jail doors, his face paling under the street lamp's sodium glow. Patel's herbs wilted overnight from mysterious pesticide spray, the chemical burn stinging my nostrils as I inspected. Whispers turned to shouts at the next HOA gathering, the hall packed with sweat-slicked bodies, voices rising in a cacophony that drowned the air conditioner's hum. I stood up again, documents in hand, the paper heavy with truth. Your restrictions are void. State law overrides your bylaws. Evelyn slammed her gavel, the wood-on-wood crack echoing like a shot, her perfume overpowering in the confined space. You're out of order! But the crowd murmured, shifting uncomfortably on creaky seats, the tension thick as fog. As I left, rain slicking my hair, dripping cold down my collar, I overheard her on the phone. Get the lawyers. Bury him in fees. My stomach twisted, the acid taste of dread rising. The turning point crept in like high tide, digging deeper into county records online, the screen's blue light straining my eyes in the dim room, keyboard clicks punctuating the silence. I found old deeds from 1952. The lake wasn't HOA property. It was privately held by a defunct company, forgotten in bureaucratic limbo. Adverse possession might apply, but better yet, it was up for tax auction. My engineering mind raced, mapping strategies like flood zones. The smell of popcorn from my microwave snack grounded me, buttery and comforting amid the chaos. Then the betrayal hit. A friend in the group, Tim from down the block, a slick salesman with a perpetual cologne cloud, leaked my plans to Evelyn. I caught them whispering at the community pool, chlorine sharp in the air, water splashing from laughing kids oblivious to the drama. Tim's laugh boomed, false and hollow, as Evelyn's eyes met mine across the fence, triumphant. My blood ran cold, the sun's heat suddenly oppressive, sweat pooling at my back. What they did next almost made me lose everything, but it also gave me the win of my life. Pushing forward, I attended the tax sale incognito, the auction house echoing with gavel strikes and muffled bids, the air stale with old carpet and anticipation. I won the lake for a steal, the deed's ink still fresh, smelling of promise. But Evelyn found out, her fury manifesting in a midnight visit. tires screeching on wet pavement, her knocks pounding like heartbeats. You think you can expose our HOA like this? We'll sue you into oblivion. Standing on my porch, rain drumming on the tin roof, wind whipping leaves that stuck wetly to my skin, I held the deed aloft. Too late. The lake's mine. Her face contorted, lightning illuminating the shock, thunder drowning her curses. But as she stormed off, slipping on the slick steps with a thud that echoed painfully, I realized her vulnerability. Her own house relied on an easement through that water for drainage. Cut it off, and she'd flood. The third knowledge bomb sealed it. In property disputes, owning the water source grants riparian rights, allowing me to control access and ban violators legally, exposing the HOA's illegal overreach in one stroke. But just as victory loomed, a sheriff's notice arrived at dawn, the paper damp from morning dew, the words blurring in the early light. Eviction proceedings initiated by the board for nuisance. My hands shook, the coffee mug clattering on the counter, steam rising like my rising panic. How deep did this scandal go? And what hidden leverage did Evelyn still hold? The eviction notice hit like a sucker punch. The sheriff's seal glaring up at me from the kitchen table where sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting striped shadows that danced mockingly on the paper. My coffee had gone cold. It's bitter. Dregs coating my tongue as I reread the words, immediate cessation of all disruptive activities or face forcible removal. The house smelled of burnt toast from my forgotten breakfast, the acrid scent mingling with the faint, musty odor of the old deed I'd clutched all night. Outside, the lake lapped gently at the shore, a deceptive calm, while birds chirped obliviously in the cypress branches heavy with moss. But inside, my mind raced like a storm-churned current. Evelyn's HOA had escalated from fines to full-on war, labeling my ownership claim as a nuisance that threatened property values. How could they? I'd just bought the lake, fair and square. At that tax auction, the gavel's echo still ringing in my ears like a victory bell. Yet here I was, heart pounding against my ribs, the eviction threat twisting my gut like a hooked fish fighting the line. I slammed the notice down, the table vibrating under my palm, and grabbed my keys, the metal jangling sharply in the quiet morning. Driving to the county courthouse, the humid Florida air rushed through the cracked window, carrying the salty tang of nearby wetlands and the rumble of my truck's engine over potholed roads. Palm fronds whipped by in a green blur, and I replayed the auction in my head. The stuffy room packed with bidders, the auctioneer's monotone chant cutting through the murmur of voices, the sweat beading on my forehead as I outbid a shadowy figure in the back. Now, Evelyn was countering with legal threats, her board's lawyers probably sharpening their claws on loopholes I'd missed. But as an ex-civil engineer, I'd mapped floodplains and navigated regulatory mazes. This was just another terrain to conquer. Arriving at the courthouse, the marble steps slick from overnight rain, I pushed through heavy doors into the chilled lobby where the echo of footsteps bounced off high ceilings, and the faint scent of floor wax hung in the air. The clerk, a wiry woman with glasses perched on her nose, handed over public records with a sympathetic cluck, the papers rustling like dry leaves as I scanned them. That's when the harassment truly ramped up. Evelyn's smear campaign began in earnest. Anonymous posts on the neighborhood app accused me of being a troublemaker, eco-terrorist, even hinting at forged deeds. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. The screen's glow harsh in the dim records room, each ping like a mosquito bite irritating my skin. What would you have done if your own neighbors turned on you like this? Comment below. Let's see how many have fought back against HOA bullies. The community harm spread like ripples from a stone tossed in the lake. Mr. Ramirez found his mechanic shop targeted by anonymous complaints to the city, inspectors swarming. His garage where the clang of tools and the sharp smell of motor oil usually dominated. He called me that evening, his voice thick with frustration over the line, the background hum of his TV news adding to the urgency. They say my signs are too bright, Jack, but it's Evelyn. Her nephew owns the competing shop downtown. I felt the outrage burn in my chest, hot as the summer asphalt I'd paced earlier, my bare feet sticking slightly to the cool tile floor of my kitchen. Mrs. Patel's community garden, once vibrant with the earthy aroma of basil and tomatoes ripening under. The sun was declared a health hazard overnight. Workers in yellow vests ripping up plants with the grind of shovels in dirt, leaving her in tears amid the uprooted chaos. Monday brought more fines, stacked on my doorstep like unwanted mail, the envelopes. Crisp and accusing, demanding payment for environmental disturbances from my surveying. Tuesday, threats via email, the cursor blinking mockingly as I read Evelyn's veiled warnings. Cease or face liens that will bankrupt you. The words blurred through my reading glasses, the computer's fan whirring softly in the stuffy home office, where dust motes floated lazily. Wednesday, sabotage. My truck's tires slashed in the driveway, the hiss of escaping air lingering in the memory as I knelt on the gravel, stones biting into my knees, the metallic scent of rubber sharp in my nostrils. Each day built on the last, a montage of aggression that tested my limits, my sleep fractured by nightmares of losing the house, the lake's dark waters swallowing everything. But I countered with tactical digging, drawing on my engineering past like plotting a bridge over treacherous waters. Late nights in the garage, the fluorescent bulbs buzzing overhead, casting harsh shadows on blueprints spread across the workbench, the wood surface scarred from years of use and smelling faintly of sawdust. I cross-referenced old surveys with current satellite images on my laptop, the screen's blue light straining my eyes, clicks of the mouse punctuating the silence broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. Allies deepened the fight. Ramirez brought his mechanical savvy, rigging hidden cameras around properties with the whir of drills and the snap of wires connecting. Like fixing a carburetor, he grunted, sweat gleaming on his forehead under the garage light. The oil on his hands leaving greasy prints that I wiped away with a rag soaked in solvent, its chemical bite clearing my head. Mrs. Patel contributed herbal teas during our strategy sessions on her porch, the steam rising with notes of chamomile and ginger soothing my frayed nerves, the wicker chairs creaking under our weight as fireflies blinked in the twilight yard. We uncovered emails leaked by a disgruntled board member, proof of Evelyn's kickbacks from contractors, the digital trails glowing on my tablet like incriminating fingerprints. The air in those meetings thickened with determination, laughter, bubbling up amid the tension, cold beers sweating condensation that dripped onto coasters with a soft plop. Ever felt the rush of turning the tables on a tyrant? If you think HOAs should be held accountable, type yes in the comments to get this trending. Around the 20% mark of this intensifying battle, perhaps a week into the nonstop assaults, I dropped the first knowledge bomb of this phase while confronting Evelyn at a pop-up board meeting in the community pavilion. The tent flaps billowed in the breeze, carrying the scent of barbecue from a nearby grill and the murmur of disgruntled residents shuffling on metal chairs that scraped against concrete. "Your eviction push is baseless," I declared, voice steady. Despite the knot in my stomach, the microphone feedback squealing briefly like a wounded animal. Under Florida Statute 723-03, HOAs must prove actual harm with evidence, not just petty grudges. Where's your proof? Her eyes widened, the flush creeping up her neck, visible even under the pavilion's strung lights, her perfume cloying as she leaned forward. But the crowd shifted, whispers rising like steam from hot pavement. The stakes rose, higher as harassment turned personal. One sweltering afternoon, as I fished defiantly from my dock, the sun glaring off the water, waves lapping with a rhythmic slap against the pilings, the fishy brine mixing with sunscreen on my skin. A drone buzzed overhead, its propellers whining like an angry hornet. Evelyn's doing, no doubt, spying for compliance checks. I swatted at it futilely, the air shimmering with heat, my shirt clinging damply to my back. That night, social media exploded with doctored photos of my property looking derelict, comments flooding in like a digital storm. The keyboards clatter under my fingers as I refuted them one by one, exhaustion weighing on my eyelids. Community fallout worsened. Families whispered about divided loyalties at the pool, chlorine sharp in the air, splashes echoing as kids dove in oblivious. A young couple, the Johnsons, faced denial of their home addition permit after siding with me. Their blueprints crumpled in frustration on their kitchen table where the scent of fresh-baked cookies couldn't mask the bitterness. I visited them, the door creaking open to reveal worried faces. The cool blast of AC a relief from the outdoor mugginess. "We're with you, Jack," Mr. Johnson said, his handshake firm but clammy, the weight of shared defiance pressing down. My counterattack gained momentum with a game-changing find, buried in forgotten county files, accessed via a late-night drive to the archives where the building's HVAC hummed lowly and the pages turned with a whispery crinkle. I discovered the HOA's incorporation papers were flawed, missing signatures from original founders, dating back to the 80s. The revelation hit like cool water on a parched throat, the musty archive smell clinging to my clothes as I photocopied furiously, the machine's heat warming my hands. At the 50% juncture, amid a heated alleyway confrontation after spotting Evelyn's SUV tailing me, the exhaust fumes choking the narrow space between buildings, her engine idling with a low growl, I unleashed the second knowledge bomb. "Your board's illegal from the start," I shot back, voice echoing off brick walls slick with condensation, the distant traffic roar underscoring the tension. "Florida law requires full consensus for HOA formation under Chapter 617. Yours lacks it, making every action voidable." She faltered, her heels scraping pavement as she stepped back, the street lamp casting her shadow long and wavering, but her retort came sharp. "You'll regret this exposure." The midpoint twist slammed in like a hurricane shutter banging in the wind. Evelyn unveiled surprise leverage. She'd rallied the board to file a class-action countersuit, claiming my lake purchase disrupted communal drainage, backed by a forged engineering report from her nephew's firm. The document arrived via courier, the envelope heavy in my hands, ink smudged slightly from handling, the legal jargon swimming before my eyes in the dim evening light of my living room where the ceiling fan clicked rhythmically overhead. Panic surged, cold sweat trickling down my spine, the taste of bile rising as I realized they'd pivoted to environmental claims, twisting my own expertise against me. But I pivoted too, calling in favors from old army buddies now in surveying, their voices crackling over the phone with static promising on-site inspections. We met at dawn by the lake, mist rising ethereally, the chills seeping through my jacket as tools clinked in their cases, the earthy dampness grounding our resolve. Reports in hand, the paper crisp and data-laden, we debunked her fakes point by point, graphs, and measurements, smelling faintly of fresh print toner. Harassment peaked with a smear in the local paper, Evelyn's influence reaching the editor, the article's bold headlines accusing me of fraud, the newsprint ink staining my fingers as I crumpled it in rage, the kitchen smelling of overbrewed coffee I'd gulped down for fuel. Neighbors avoided eye contact at the mailbox cluster, the metal doors clanging shut like judgments, the sun beating down mercilessly. Yet allies rallied. A petition circulated in hushed backyard gatherings, signatures flowing like ink from pens. That clicked open with purpose, the scent of grilling burgers masking the underlying tension. What they pulled next tested my breaking point. Anonymous calls to my former employer, dredging up fabricated complaints, the phone's ring piercing. The quiet night like a siren. Sleep evaded me. The sheets tangled and damp from tossing, moonlight filtering through curtains to illuminate the deed on my nightstand. Broadening the stakes, the HOA threatened to hike fees community-wide to cover legal defenses, letters fluttering. Through mail slots like unwelcome leaves, residents groaning over morning coffee that steamed with frustration. I door-knocked, the pavement hot underfoot, sweat stinging my eyes, sharing evidence packets that rustled in the breeze, convincing holdouts with facts over front porch lemonades tart on the tongue. At the 80% mark, during a stormy board hearing, where rain hammered the community center roof like artillery, thunder rumbling deep in my bones, I dropped the third knowledge bomb. Your drainage claims crumble under riparian doctrine. Ownership of the lakebed grants me control over outflows, and your illegal dams violate state water codes per Section 373-406. The room erupted, chairs scraping as people stood, Evelyn's gavel pounding futilely, her face paling under the fluorescent glare, the air thick with ozone from the storm outside. The battle's intensity pushed me to my limits, vulnerability cracking through my sarcasm. Nights alone by the lake, waves whispering, secrets, the cool breeze carrying doubts that chilled my skin. But empowerment flickered. Allies' support warming like a campfire's glow, embers popping softly. The next 60 seconds of this tale will show how one ally's betrayal nearly cost everything, but also sparked the final showdown. As media cameras flashed outside my door, reporters' voices clamoring like seagulls, microphones thrusting forward with the scent of fresh rain on asphalt, Evelyn's lawyer hovered with a settlement pen, ink gleaming ominously. Would I sign away my fight or expose the scandal that could dissolve the HOA forever? The media frenzy outside my door felt like a siege, flashbulbs popping like gunfire in the humid dusk, casting erratic shadows across the porch where reporters jostled, their microphones thrusting forward like spears. The air reeked of wet earth from an earlier downpour, mingling with the sharp ozone of camera batteries and the distant rumble of news vans idling on the street. Evelyn's lawyer, a slick-suited shark named Harlan, no relation, thank God, hovered, with the settlement papers, his pen glinting under the spotlights, ink poised to sign away my fight. "Take the deal, Mr. Harlan," he drawled, his cologne overpowering, a synthetic musk that turned my stomach. "Drop the lake claim, pay the fines, and this HOA scandal fades. Otherwise, we drag you through court until you're bankrupt." My allies flanked me, Ramirez with his grease-stained hands clenched, Patel's eyes fierce behind her glasses, but the pressure squeezed like a vice, the crowd's murmurs swelling into a roar. Would I fold or ignite the final takedown? I shoved. The papers back, the crisp edges crumpling in his grip, and stepped into the lights, the heat from the bulbs warming my face as raindrops began to patter again, cool and insistent on my skin. "No deal," I barked, voice cutting through the chaos like a foghorn over the lake. The camera's word capturing the moment, and Evelyn, lurking in the shadows of her SUV across the street, slammed her door with a metallic thud that echoed my resolve. This was the climax brewing. A showdown not just in court, but at the emergency HOA meeting she'd called for dawn, where her arrogance would be her undoing. As the reporters dispersed, tires squealing on wet pavement, I retreated inside, the door clicking shut behind me, heart racing with the taste of impending justice sharp on my tongue. The night dragged on in a haze of preparation, my living room lit by the soft glow of lamps casting long shadows on stacks of documents, the musty scent of old paper blending with the fresh brew of coffee steaming in my mug. I pored over the evidence one last time, fingers tracing lines of legalese, the keyboard clacking under frantic notes as thunder grumbled outside, shaking the windows like an omen. Allies trickled in, Ramirez with a toolkit clinking in his bag, ready to expose tampered meters. Patel with printouts of petition signatures, the ink still fragrant and bold. We huddled around the table, voices low and urgent, the ceiling fan whirring overhead, stirring the warm air thick with determination. "We've got them cornered," I whispered. But doubt flickered. Evelyn's hidden leverage, whatever it was, loomed like a submerged gator in the lake's depths. What if your life's work hung on one meeting? Would you back down? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire the next takedown. Dawn broke with a vengeance, the sky a bruised purple as I drove to the community center, wipers swishing rhythmically against the windshield, smearing rain that drummed on the roof, like impatient fingers. The parking lot overflowed, cars crammed bumper to bumper, headlights piercing the mist rising from the asphalt. Inside, the hall buzzed with tension, folding chairs scraping on linoleum as residents packed in, the air heavy with the aroma of cheap coffee percolating in urns and the faint, acrid tang of nervous sweat. Evelyn presided at the podium, her bleach-blonde hair impeccable under the harsh fluorescence, but her eyes darted, betraying cracks in her facade, nails bitten short, a quirk I'd noticed in Act Two's vulnerability reveal, her composure fraying like old rope. She banged the gavel, the sharp crack silencing the murmurs, and launched into her tirade. "This man," she pointed at me, voice quivering with feigned outrage, "has exposed our community to scandal, illegally claiming our lake and disrupting harmony." The crowd shifted uneasily, whispers rippling like wind over water, some nodding in agreement while others glared, the division palpable in the stuffy room where the AC hummed futilely against the rising heat. I stood, heart pounding like a bass drum in my chest, and approached the mic, the cord tangling slightly underfoot, the spotlight's glare stinging my eyes. "Let's set the record straight," I began, voice steady despite the knot in my gut, unfolding my deeds and reports with a flourish, papers rustling like leaves in a breeze. The first knowledge bomb dropped around that early surge, about 20% into the confrontation, as she interrupted with a smug grin. "Your purchase is void, the lake's common property." But I countered smoothly. "Wrong. Under Florida's tax lien statutes, Section 197(552), unredeemed properties like this revert fully to the buyer, overriding HOA claims unless proven fraudulent, and yours aren't." Gasps echoed, chairs creaking as people leaned forward, Evelyn's face paling, the room's tension thickening like fog rolling in off the lake. Her arrogance flared then, a fatal misstep. She snatched a forged map from her folder, slamming it down. With a thud that vibrated the podium, her perfume wafting overpoweringly as she leaned in. "See? Our boundaries include it all." But I'd anticipated this, my engineering metaphors kicking in, like bridging a gap with unyielding steel. I projected the real surveys on the wall screen, the beam humming to life, illuminating discrepancies in stark lines and colors, the clicker cool in my palm. Residents murmured louder, the air buzzing with outrage, the scent of spilled coffee, adding to the chaos as someone knocked over a cup, liquid spreading dark and sticky on the floor. Ever watched a bully's empire crack in real time? If you've got an HOA horror, share it below. I might cover yours next. The showdown intensified, Evelyn rallying her loyalists with passive-aggressive barbs, her voice rising shrill over the growing din. "He's a newcomer stirring trouble." One crony, a paunchy retiree named Bill, stood to echo her, his tie askew, breath heavy with mints that failed to mask morning coffee. But allies fired back, Patel rising gracefully, her sari whispering. As she moved, detailing the garden sabotage with photos on her phone, the screen's glow reflecting in widened eyes. Ramirez followed, tools clinking in his pocket as he demonstrated tampered finds with a gadget he'd rigged, the device beeping sharply in the hushed moments. Midway through, at that 50% pivot where false victories tease, Evelyn played her ace, or so she thought. "We have affidavits from founders proving our rights." She waved notarized papers, the stamps gleaming fresh, but suspicion gnawed. Her nephew's firm had stamped them, reeking of hypocrisy. I paused, letting the room simmer, the clock ticking audibly on the wall, then unleashed the second knowledge bomb. Those are backdated fakes. Florida's notary laws under Chapter 117 require contemporaneous witnessing. Yours violate it, making every HOA action since inception illegal and exposing you to fraud charges. The hall erupted, shouts bouncing off walls, Evelyn stammering, her hands trembling as she gripped the podium, knuckles white against the wood. But she doubled down, arrogance her downfall. "Vote now! Expel him!" The ballots circulated, papers shuffling amid heated debates, the air thick with body heat and the faint metallic tang of adrenaline. I watched, pulse racing, as counts tallied on a whiteboard, markers squeaking dryly, numbers climbing in my favor. Whispers turned to cheers from my side, boos from hers, the division splitting the room like a fault line. What they uncovered next sealed her fate. A hidden recording from an ally's camera, played on speakers with a crackle, Evelyn's voice admitting kickbacks in a hushed call, the audio tinny but damning. The crowd gasped collectively, the sound wave washing over me like a cool breeze, my skin prickling with goosebumps despite the warmth. As the vote swung decisively against her, around that 80% mark of unrelenting buildup, I dropped the final. Decisive knowledge bomb, the one to dissolve the HOA tyranny. With proven corruption, Florida Statute 723-07 allows residents to petition for dissolution if a majority votes, stripping all powers and restoring individual rights. Petitions flew, signatures scribbling furiously, pens scratching paper in a frenzy. Evelyn's protests drowned in the uproar, her face crumpling like wet cardboard under the lights. The climax peaked in her unraveling. She lunged for the mic, heels clicking frantically, voice cracking. "You can't! I've built this!" But the sheriff, summoned earlier, stepped in, badge glinting, handcuffs clinking softly as he read charges: fraud, harassment, the works. Her petty habits flashed back. The spying binoculars, passive letters, sabotaged docs, all exposed in the evidence montage projected now, slides clicking through with mechanical precision. She was let out, resisting with a shriek that pierced the air, doors slamming behind her like a period on her reign. Resolution washed over the room like dawn light filtering through blinds, warm and golden. The vote passed. HOA dissolved, rights restored, fines refunded amid cheers that shook the rafters, hugs exchanged with backslaps resounding. The lake was mine, but I opened access fairly, banning only violators, the community healing as neighbors. Mingled outside, rain easing to a drizzle that freshened the air with petrichor. Full circle, I stood on my dock that evening, the same one from that first fishing trip. Boots sinking into mossy wood, the chill breeze carrying pine sap and lake. Brine. The rod in my hands felt victorious, line whispering into water with a plop, echoing that initial defiance. No fines, no threats, just peace. The sunset painting the ripples orange, fireflies emerging like stars. This triumph wasn't just mine. It was a beacon of empowerment, showing resilience against petty power, fairness prevailing like an unyielding current. In the end, one man's stand exposed the scandal, delivered justice, and reminded us, no one's above the law. Your story could be next. Comment your HOA horror below, and I might cover it. If you believe no one is above the law, hit subscribe, so we can take down every corrupt HOA together. Like, share, and tag a friend who needs to hear this. The more people know, the harder it is for HOAs to get away with this. Want to see another insane HOA takedown? Stick around. You won't believe what happens next.